Ended up in the Navy, was on submarines. None of my education is classified. This girl, I'm sure she thought I was staring at her, and I was.
So what was that call like?
Let us send you an application.
No, thank you.
It's just so unbelievable.
Like, that's not an easy step to take.
But now it's Maria's turn to say no, 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 no. People's lives were changed at camp.
How was God meeting you in your current challenges?
It's hard.
Welcome to Changed Lives, a special limited series in which I explore the incredible stories of the people behind the scenes at Life Action, a ministry with a mission of reviving relationships through transformative events. Each of these individuals, my coworkers, have experienced God move in big and unexpected ways. The more I heard their stories, the more I thought, people need to hear this. In this series, you'll get a first-hand look at how God is working in and through the people of Life Action, the challenges they face, the faith that sustains them, and the lives being transformed along the way. Their stories are powerful. Today, I'm joined by Jeff and Maria Mann, two people with a deep love for camp ministry and a powerful story of faith. We talk about their transition from Navy life to full-time ministry, including the challenges of raising support and moving across the country. Through it all, God provided exactly what they needed. You might know Jeff as Spanky, the creative force behind years of camp activities, some a little more dangerously fun than others. And while Maria stays behind the scenes, camp wouldn't run nearly as smoothly without her steady presence. As you listen, consider how you might be part of changing lives. Life Action is fueled by prayers, generosity, and stories like Jeff and Maria's. Maybe God's inviting you to join in.
So today I'm joined by Jeff and Maria Mann, and I am looking forward to learning more about your story. Your official name is Jeff, but you go by Spanky.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we're going to learn about why and everything else. So before we jump into that, tell me a little bit about what your role is today at Life Action.
I do activities at the camp, and I've been doing that for about 30 years.
And when you say the camp, that sounds like a small thing, but that means family camp all summer long. That means any retreats that are coming in. So it's a pretty busy gig for sure, trying to plan activities and all the fun for all the people. So, and then how about you, Maria?
I've just recently started working in food service with Austin. I'm doing inventory and ordering, and now we're working on menus for next year.
Mm-hmm. Would people be surprised how much food we go through at the camp?
Oh, yes.
Especially men's retreat.
Especially men's retreats, yes.
Bacon.
Bacon. Oh, so much bacon. Well, wonderful. I can't wait to hear more about what you do today. But first I want to go back. And Maria, I'll start with you. So tell me where you're from. How'd you grow up?
I grew up in Washington State. My dad was a pastor of a small country church. Public school, did all the things.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. And growing up in Washington State, did you have siblings?
I have two siblings. I'm the oldest.
Okay, you're the oldest. Was your mom pretty involved in the church as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you grew up kind of seeing families serving together.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Wonderful. And how about you? Where did
I
you
was a PK.
Pastor's kid. I know what that means now.
Yeah, I grew up, I was born in West Virginia and grew up in Southern Ohio. And we lived next door to the church as well. And so we were always, the staff children, like the secretarial staff, they'd come with their parents and we'd spend the summer out riding bikes around and stuff like that. So we lived in a small neighborhood.
Did you have siblings?
I'm the middle of three boys.
Middle of three boys. Okay. Well, that sounds like a fun way to grow up. So you're essentially kind of on opposite sides of the coast growing up then. Okay. And so you went to public school and you graduated high school. And then what did you decide to do after that?
I went to college to be an X-ray tech.
Okay. And was that something you always wanted to pursue?
No, just kind of came up senior year and
Okay.
fit with what I was good at. So
And did you enjoy that?
I did.
Yeah. And how long did you do that for?
I have 5 years.
5 years. Okay. After high school then for you, what's the plan? What do you decide to do?
ended up in the Navy, and a lot of things. A lot of my education is classified. I did nuclear engineering. I run a nuclear power plant, and was on submarines.
Did you always have plans to go to the Navy? Was that
No, I was
okay.
recruited.
You were recruited
I was recruited very early.
very early? Okay.
We moved when I was in 6th grade, and they did some testing on me, like just standard basic testing.
Gotcha. So you spend time in the Navy in nuclear engineering and submarine. What was that life like?
Loved the job.
Okay.
First, I was single, but then once I was married, I didn't like being away from home so long.
How long were you out to sea?
They would keep it below 90 days.
Okay. Was that tough being out for 90 days, even before you were married? Was that life tough being in that small, confined
No,
ship? No?
it's some of the testing they do is they won't take you on a submarine unless you volunteer to go on a submarine.
Okay.
And then once part of the acceptance process is that they have to do psych evaluations on you and making sure you can handle it, that you don't get claustrophobic or things like that.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that probably caused many men who are planning on going not to go. Just the thought of that confined space right now is making me a little bit itchy, nervous.
We had to have some people taken off.
Yeah,
at
I'm
times.
sure. I'm sure. Okay. So you're in the Navy and you're becoming an X-ray tech. So tell me about how your paths converge, because again, you're on opposite sides of the country and then actually you're out at sea. So how did your two stories intertwine?
So I grew up in the southern part of Washington State, and I went to school in Tacoma for the X-ray tech. And then the family I was living with, I went to church with them. So, and that's where we met.
So the Navy took me to the West Coast. I had a great aunt that went to that church, and my mom said, make sure you go visit her and say hello and go to church with them. So I did. I took a couple of guys with me, and we went to this church. And we just had our first submarine run, and this is our first day or two back. I sat there staring out the window because I hadn't seen sunlight and windows for quite some time. And right in my line of sight was this girl. And I kept staring, and I'm sure she thought I was staring at her, but she was behind me a row, but everybody else probably thought I was staring at her. And I was.
That's pretty impressive that she stole your gaze versus the sunlight and the outside that you hadn't seen in 90 days.
I hadn't seen girls in 90 days either.
So you see this beautiful girl in class, and then what do you do?
This Sunday school class was the college and career class, and that was the first hour. And so then when they go to the auditorium for the main service, all these college and career kids kind of stayed in a herd and went and sat in their regular spot down on the front row right, They'd pass this little book and a card, and you signed in. And so I sat down the row from her, just so I wasn't crowding in. Wasn't being aggressive. I was being passive aggressive. No, but so I was down the road from her. So when the card came down and it was my turn to sign in, I looked at the card before mine and memorized phone number.
Do you know any of this is going on at the time? Or you're oblivious
I'm
to
oblivious.
it? Okay. You're there to actually do what you're supposed to be doing. Okay. Had you noticed him at that time yet or not?
I mean, I saw him looking out the window.
And so does he eventually ask you out on a date? Or how do you go from taking all of her information down to then, smoothly transitioning to ask her out?
So the college career class was, they had a really active group. So we were constantly doing activities. So we just had lots of.
One of the first things we did was go bowling
Yeah.
after service on a Sunday night. So I made sure that I got in her group. We had retreats and outings and stuff like that, and I just hung out with her a lot.
Now, at that time, were you then going back out to sea?
Hmm.
Okay. All right. And then at what point do you decide to ask her to marry you?
I think early on, within a few days of meeting and like having, I think we went to a retreat, and spent a lot of time just in conversation, just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I called my parents and said, I think I found the girl. First time I went to her house and met her parents was at a Christmas time event. And they were not expecting a military guy.
I said I was bringing a friend. That's all. They had no idea. And I had been told not to date any military guys.
Oh, why was that?
I don't know. That
Well,
was
there-
just
there are
Tacoma
three.
is in the middle of
Okay.
military, like Army, Navy,
Sure.
Air Force. Like it's,
Probably wise counsel. Yeah, sure.
but we had a lot in common because
Sure.
both of our dads are preachers.
Mhm.
Both our careers were both radiation related.
Yeah.
So like we just had a lot in common.
Mhm.
A lot of the traditional Christmas things that they did at their house and at their church were similar to what I grew up with. And so there's just a comfort level there.
So, what year did you get married?
89.
89. And then you're still in the Navy at this time,
Yes.
and you're still working as an X-ray tech. So now you have to leave your wife and go out on different runs, and you're probably thinking that's about enough of this, huh?
I didn't like being away from home.
Yeah.
But it was even worse for her because she had a system when I was gone, and she had a system, going through work and things like this. And whenever I'd come home, I'd throw a monkey wrench in that machinery. God made me dissatisfied with going away from home so much, and so that kind of opened the doors for us to pursue ministry or other work.
Had you had a thought of ministry? You've been thinking about that?
No, but we both grew up in pastors' homes, and we always knew that was probably something we'd always consider. Probably
Okay.
when I left the Navy, I stayed in the nuclear field for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years.
And then talk about when you were in class and how you were thinking you might want to do something else.
So just like God made me dissatisfied with going to sea and leaving home for months at a time, he also made me dissatisfied once I'd gotten out of the Navy and joined the corporate world. He made me dissatisfied with the greed that I saw there, and it's not the kind of life I wanted to live.
We were in South Carolina at this point. So
Okay,
we'd moved
so you
to
had
the
moved.
other side, which is where his parents were.
Sure.
So
Yeah, when I left the Navy, we looked at both coasts. We knew we wanted to be at least near one side of the coast, to be near the family.
So he had been working at
General physics.
General Physics, and that job had ended.
Okay.
And that's where, he knew he didn't want to keep going with that. So he had applied to Multnomah in Portland and been accepted. And at the same time, we had a Sunday school class, and our teacher was just going through, God made you, you were created, he knew you in your mother's womb, and he gave you specific gifts and talents. And he had us list out 10 things we were good at, and then a half dozen things that other people told us we were good at. And he said, how can you use those things
Or even things you enjoy.
or things you enjoy to serve God? And so we wrote our lists, and they were very eclectic. And he said, after church, he said something about we should work at a camp.
Our church always rented a camp every summer, staffed it, and did our youth group. And so we kind of had that understanding what it takes to be a camp employee, and so we knew that you had to know how to do a little bit of everything. It's just camp life. You hang drywall for several days, and you get done, and you're like, I'm glad I don't do that for a living. And then you lay carpet for a while. Now I'm glad I don't do that for a living, but you don't mind doing it for a few days at a time. Moving on.
The variety, and you had a variety of interests too, like cooking and serving people. Yeah.
So, and she had grown up working at a camp, like a campfire girls, it was called at that time, I think. She had experience, teaching outdoor life and things like that. So,
And so you both thought, okay, maybe camp. Maybe that could be a ministry for us. Okay. And so then do you look for camps right away? What do you do?
Our Sunday school teacher had been to Life Action Ranch as a teenager and said that impacted his life.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff was calling around to different camps to say, like, do I go to school? What kind of degree? Do you want experience?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I do? Like, because we think
What
this
are
is
the
the
best
direction
next steps?
we want to go. And so, of course, when he calls Life Action, they say, let us send you an application.
Mm-hmm.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. I'm already going to college.
Yeah,
I'm just
That was my
trying to
thinking.
plan.
Yeah.
I was already enrolled. Yeah, I'm calling different places and asking those questions. And when they said send you an application, I'm thinking, no, I'm just testing the waters to find out what you would prefer. We prefer to send you an application. And we get all that through, we get you to take the application. They say, oh, you have to raise support now. And I said, raise support, and they said, yeah, this is in '94,
Yeah.
and so they said you have to have $1,000 a month for a couple to be on the road. You don't raise $1,000 a month support in 4 weeks. I just wasn't planning on going, but I sent the application anyway, and they wanted you to sing. They wanted you to send a demo tape. Can you play a guitar and sing around a campfire? What can you do? And so I just sang and sent that in. And they called up and said, we want you to travel. Would you be willing to travel for a year? But now it's Maria's turn to say no. No. I'm not living in host homes. I'm not, by this time we're married, 4 years, 5 years. And I knew she's very introverted, so she didn't want to try to entertain conversation with people, and look how much she's grown.
Mm-hmm. I know.
I told them we'd pray about it, and so we did, and I basically came up with we had a compromise. I said, if we don't try to raise support and God still brings it to us, then we'll know He really wants us there.
And you're thinking, great, isn't going to happen. So
It's like, I can handle it.
I can do. Yeah, great compromise. Sure.
Then my dad got a phone call. I told you he was on a mission board. There was a guy who wanted to tithe on an inheritance that he had gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he went to a small country church as well, apparently. And he knew if he just gave 10% of his inheritance to this little church, it would just ruin him. And it'd make him the voice that everybody listened to, and he didn't want that. So apparently this inheritance, the tithe on the inheritance was on $1 million. So the inheritance was in more than $10 million. So he's calling different mission boards, and he got hold of my dad, and he was asking for the missionaries from that mission board that were raising support so he could do it. So my dad gives him a whole list, and the guy said thank you, and my dad, of course, knew what we were thinking, and he said, I hate to ask you this because it's my own son, but if they have $12,000, $1,000 a year, $1,000 a month for a year, they can travel for a year with Life Action Ministries. He said, you tell them they got it.
Thanks, Dad. Pretty amazing.
You had to watch his back around Maria for a while.
So what was that call like to you all?
He said, I need to tell you something. He said, you've got $12,000 so you can go to Life Action. Like I said, we had to be there 4 weeks is when staff training started. We got, information on what they believed and the cutting edge commitments and what they did in churches and got information because I don't think I ever honestly knew what they were. I think I remembered seeing a bus with Life Action. And so at that point, we thought we better go find out what's going on, what we're getting into. So we drove a couple hours away toward Atlanta, and and watched an America You're Too Young to Die program. And we walked up at the end and said hello to some of the singers and said, we're going to be joining you here in a few weeks.
Wow.
I think we ended up on that team, didn't we?
Yeah, it was blue team.
At that point, did you think, okay, this is a good thing. We're ready for this? Or were you still a little bit unsure of what you were getting into?
We were impressed with the program we saw. But there again, we still didn't. We saw the prepackaged
Yeah.
America program.
Yeah.
And they were very good. They asked us to go on the road for a year because they'd tried to have the first family camps in '94, and they didn't have enough people sign up.
Yeah.
And I think they had 3 families sign up, and they brought them in and had kind of a pseudo camp experience with them.
That's what Jimmy and Lori said. They had a kind of like a retreat.
Yeah.
You happened to come right during that transition when they were trying to switch it over, and the first year the attendance was light, and so they were wondering if it was going to be a go or not. Okay.
The guy who was tithing on an inheritance, and he said, "Tell them they got it, $12,000." Well,
So we came.
we came, and then come to find out, my dad called and said, "There's something going on. They've had some kind of breach or some kind of somebody did something wrong with the money, and they've frozen the assets. And to this day, we've never seen one red penny."
It's just so unbelievable.
So God has supported us on a promise of $12,000. He's supported us for 30 some odd years now.
Wow. And so that support then that you needed to have came from other sources.
Well,
It got you here, but it never actually arrived. So, but then support came from other sources to keep you here.
I haven't starved yet.
It's a good thing. So you go out on the road. And what's that first year like? What team are you on? What's it like?
Apparently my demo tape was good enough to get me on the singing team.
Ooh. So you were a singer.
I was a singer.
Okay.
So he was a singer and truck driver. I was financial clerk on blue team.
On the blue team. So Steve and Debbie.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was good because we didn't know anything about Life Action. So like that taught us what it's about.
Yeah.
It was
So
the
it was
heartbeat of
very
the
good.
ministry.
What was that? What was the heartbeat of the ministry?
Revival.
Okay. Talk about that. What does that mean to you?
Just coming back to life. I think of it as a CPR for a church. You come and you take assessment of where you are, what your life is like. And either you're dead, you're dying. You need to be revived from no matter what state you're in. It's all about reviving the church and health care of the church spiritually.
Did you see lives transformed?
Well, personally, ourselves first. One of the first things they have you do is do a self-evaluation. It's a complete spiritual. You cannot go through that complete spiritual without getting a bunch of no's. If you're honest, you know that things could be better. But then the next day they taught grace. And grace is like an ambulance that comes, when you call for it. So they redefined grace. I always knew grace is giving something good that you didn't deserve. It changed our lives just sitting through the very first, back then they were called crusades. You just get repeated with that messaging 10 times, not just once. And people give testimony in their own churches. They're telling your story because it's the same story.
Yeah. What are some things where did God meet you, and what are some things that God taught you during that time?
Well, I would say like even the support thing, just, the truly being able to rely on him for what our needs, like that's not an easy step to take. Especially when that initial gift wasn't there. Like that's, yeah.
And that lesson has really been the foundation of your entire time in ministry and your philosophy of raising support. In a ministry, it's pretty common to have to raise support. But your philosophy is even it's so trusting in God, even probably more so than normal, quote unquote, and such a testimony to your faith in that way. So, can you talk a little bit about your philosophy on raising support?
It's miraculous the way that God got us here. The promise of support, and then it actually not being there. But I'll still take care of you. On the road for the first year, we had a few supporters. You know, our sending church. Once we said we're going to the Life Action, they'll say, "Well, we'll support you," and her church said, "We'll support you." When you're on the road as a team member, you really don't spend a whole lot if you don't need to. You know, people feed you, people house you. When you're working at camp, you eat lunch there because it's when you have to eat lunch, and so a lot of things are given to you, and when it comes time to raise support, I feel like God raised our support initially, and He knew what we needed. If you'd asked me, I would have asked for more. We both made decent money before we came. She was working in a hospital as an X-ray tech, and I was working for general physics. You don't need as much as you thought you did. We found that out because it happened. It's just amazing how we live off a smaller amount than what we would expect was, and just to pay our bills was more than what the income was. But somebody, at some point, sent a gift. You know, it's nothing we asked for, nothing we. Sometimes we don't realize that we need to pray for it.
Yeah, and it's happened so often throughout the last couple decades that it's become such a pattern. It probably seems silly to you to not trust in that pattern because God has just always provided for you, for your needs.
I don't want to tell God what my needs are. I'll tell Him what I would like. I'll tell Him what I think I need. But when it comes to raising support, I try not to tell Him what I need to be happy.
After your year on the road, do you come back to camp? And then that's where you've been ever since?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. At what point do you start your family?
Just about the time we came to camp.
Okay.
Once we were out of working fields with radioactivity. So Mariah was born in
96.
96.
Okay.
And so 95 was the year we came off the road.
Yeah. And then was that family camp? Was that the first year of actually having families at family camp where?
Our transition off the road, and there were 3 weeks of camp. There were 5 families, 6 families, 7 families, so 18 families across 3 weeks.
So a small group of families to take care of the camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that first year like?
Busy.
Yeah.
Because we were just trying to figure out what do we do.
Sure.
So
They had clothing rules back then that are different than today. For instance, this was back in the day when your singers stood on risers or stairs and had canned music in the background, and you sang with that. You could wear certain clothes, casual clothes like khakis and polo shirts.
yeah.
Real camp attire.
Yeah.
Well, camp attire, normal camp attire now is active wear.
Right.
But you could only do active wear if you were actually involved in an activity. You had to change clothes about 7 times during the day.
That's a lot of laundry.
But it didn't really get dirty because
You don't wear it long enough?
we're for a half hour to go sing. They come back and change.
So you were a singer and running activities at that point?
Yes, Jimmy ran activities and I jumped in and helped.
You jumped in to help. Okay. And then what were you doing, Maria?
I decorated for date night and I did crafts with the kids, with the clubs. And
I mean, the first year they had everything planned out and they had it all done. And then between the first and second year, they brought us in and took us under their wing. You know, we got input into menus and activities and how services should be run, the kind of layout. there was a gap between the morning service and lunch, and we'd do some kind of game so that the moms can meet together.
Mm.
And so we'd take the dads and the kids and play kickball.
Mm.
And it'd just be something silly like dads had to keep their hands in their pockets while they played kickball. There was just a lot of ways that they brought us in. And Jimmy then turned out within the next year, he became the interim director. And he was an interim director for 20 years.
That's
Not
about
quite
what
right.
he said. in
Yes,
his-
yes.
Uh-huh.
But he whispered in my ear, and he would help me know what to do with activities and things.
Yes, I heard about your activities, like the Ring of Fire. Yes.
We had that on video.
Yeah. And about how he made a rule that we were no longer going to play games where the entry was, or the starting line was, let's just see what happens.
We have to test things out.
Yeah.
And we tested the Ring of Fire.
Worked.
Had it working perfect until they actually set it up for the actual operation of it.
Luckily, everyone made it out alive. Oh, boy. And he said that you had to grab a boy from the inside of the Ring of Fire and take him out.
Well, and we practiced all that beforehand. Worked just fine. We had a shield, a big piece of wood. Once this ring got lit on fire, then we laid down the shield and had the shield of faith to quench the fiery darts.
Right.
And we laid the shield down and walked out. The kid got scared. And so, he's supposed to hang on to my shirt tail, and we walk right out. And so we walk right out, and I turn around and look, and he's not there. So I turn around and I'm going to go back in and get him. That was a scary moment.
Yeah. Did you escape with all of your hair and eyebrows and everything? Or
I did. I was on the shield.
okay. Oh, that's great. Well, I love all the stories of the games. The thing I love even more in what I've heard from other people who talk about your time leading games is the intentionality that you put into the games, specifically as it relates to dads. So can you talk about how you plan games with dads in mind?
We wanted to make sure that Dad remains the hero in his house. Just in the time we've been here, there was a major erosion of the way dads are considered in sitcoms and in advertising and things like that. It just looked like he was inept, and the kids knew it all. So we wanted to make sure that we stayed away from that and actually went countercultural there. We tried not to have games where a dad who was marginally athletic. We didn't want him to get shown up. It's one thing if Dad sacrificed himself for the fun.
Yeah.
But you never want to set a guy up to be embarrassed in front of his kids, will be embarrassed for him. One of my favorites we ever did was the Jungle Run, we called it, and the theme of the week was being commissioned, being sent. We decided that their mission was to carry coconuts to their neighboring tribe. So they had to do the jungle run, take coconuts, and deliver them. And but along the way, they had to go through mud, go through obstacles. We had logs across a big pit, and they had to go over and under these logs. They had to do a rope swing across a pit with crocodiles in it. They were made of truck tires.
Yeah.
They look cool.
Yeah.
And then they had to do a zip line, and then they had to run down the hill. And they got on this. It's in the days when Wipeout was very
Oh
popular.
yeah.
So they had to run along this wall, and we had motion detectors in this wall, and so when they go by, it'd spray water when they
Yeah.
came.
Elephants painted on it.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
So it was elephant wall.
Uh-huh.
So whenever they were climbing across the front of these elephants, they'd spray them. And then they got to the end, and the wall would swing out and knock them down into the.
Water boat.
And the whole time they're having to take these coconuts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
It bounced across the hippos.
Oh,
Another
yeah.
one. Yep.
So it's like the big in Wipeout. They had the big red balls.
Yeah.
Well, we had 3 smaller balls, like yoga balls, and we had hippo head masks, and so they had to bounce across the balls and try to align things as best we can to our theme and do those things in parallel.
Mm-hmm. So much creativity in these games. And all the while, you're raising children here at the camp. So tell me your experience as a mom raising your 4 kids growing up at camp.
Well, we lived at camp
Mhm.
for the first, I was 6 when we moved.
Mm-hmm.
So we were always, but even once we moved, I was still involved. So
Mm-hmm.
they were always there with me.
Tell me what you would say to them in the car.
Oh.
I love this.
So on our way down the hill to the front entrance, it was always camp is for the
Campers.
and it's a privilege, not a right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Did they love growing up here?
yeah, I think so. Like
Yeah.
at some point they all get bored, like there's nothing to do,
Sure.
and we say you're at a camp.
Right.
I know when we moved, Jocelyn was 2, but my kids didn't know any strangers, like because everyone who comes to camp is your
Sure.
friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had been at our new house for like a week, and one day we couldn't find her, like panic. And like we searched and searched and searched, and we found her down the street. Somebody had a dog, and like she had just gone down there to see the dog because
Everybody's a friend.
everyone's a friend. So, yeah,
It's
that was
just
a
like
little
camp
scary,
with
but
houses
yes.
and roads.
So,
Mhm.
but yeah, they all grew up and worked crew. At least.
They did.
Yeah.
Okay. So they all were a part of it from,
Oh, yeah.
which is pretty typical, it seems, of families that are working out
It was
there.
also typical that some years were better than others.
Mm-hmm.
Some kids had different personalities than others,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you ask them, each of their experiences would be different.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me more about kind of your philosophy or ministry of camp? What were you there to do, and how did you see yourselves? You've told me before about a specific passage that kind of comes to mind, and I just think it's a beautiful way to view it. So I'd love for you to share that.
I took the Matthew version of the parable of the seed and the sower. Explanation is given in Matthew, and it's that you have hard soil, you have that along the path, the birds come and eat. But the thorny soil is something we can be involved in. The thorns are the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. But the cares of this world, that's kind of what we do as a camp ministry, is that we kind of set an environment where people can hear from God. If you can take away the cares of this world, if you can bring in families and mom doesn't have to worry about choosing what's for dinner, making everybody happy. She doesn't have to worry about dishes or anything like that. And the kids really don't have chores. They could play constantly. And we talked about, Dad gets to be a hero. Mm-hmm. People's lives were changed at camp. And the message wasn't really any different. They've heard this message all their life at church. It's a different setting. It's just maybe a different voice doing the speaking. That's what we do purposefully now. Back then I didn't even realize that was happening. Mm-hmm. But now we see it and we say, we got to make this, take the burdens of the daily life off their shoulders, because lives will be changed. It's if you're still worried about the cares of this world, then it's harder to hear God's voice, because God speaks in a whisper, still small voice.
You've told so many stories of how God has met you in the challenges. How is God meeting you in your current challenges today?
Our health is our biggest challenge right now. I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. I mean, I sit here just shaking now, so my wife's pushing on my knee, trying to get me to stop shaking. My dad had Parkinson's. My mom had Alzheimer's, and those are things that I will probably in my lifetime have to deal with. It's a challenge and it's scary, but we've seen it, and we've seen it done gracefully. As I read articles and things like that, the hard part for me, it's not me that's going to have the trouble. It's her. She'll deal with the obstacles and the challenges, and I, as the patient, will just be taken care of, almost. Whereas Maria will have to handle the hard things. And it's almost harder to trust God to take care of her, because I know I can't.
It's hard.
Your lives in action all these years have just set you both up as these examples of doing, not just hearing, but actually doing and walking through it. And just the grace in which you do it is, you might not know this, but it's just inspiring, to a lot of people to see the faith and the trust and the grace you have. So for that, I'm thankful for that. But I want you to both just to hear that, just your story is just so beautiful. And walking in that faith and serving others and how you care for others. Years from now, when you look back on this legacy that you've created here, what do you hope your legacy is?
I don't need them to remember me or what I can do for people. If they try to look at how I handled things, it's very flawed. I guess I want them to see how faithful God is.
Even in your challenges, you glorify God. When you think about this ministry that you've poured your lives into, what is your hope or what are your prayers for the ministry in general that you've devoted your lives to?
I pray that we would accept with grace the things that God is doing. And the ministry of revival is not go away when Life Action goes away. And Life Action doesn't control revival in any way. We need to be careful not to say, God, this is what we need to be happy. So I think revival and the ministry of revival and the people who understand it and look for it, it's going to go on no matter what.
It's a wise answer. I want to thank you both so much for telling me your story, for answering all my questions. So I appreciate you both.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Changed Lives. If you were encouraged or inspired by what you heard, I want to invite you to take the next step. You can support the people whose story you just heard and others like them by visiting lifeaction.org/changedlives. Whether through prayer, giving, or sharing these stories, you can be part of what God is doing to revive relationships and transform lives.